We're the Women's Color Code. We're glad to see that you're all here. Thank you for coming.
So this is actually our very first panel ever, but we figured we wanted to kind of share our experiences as women of color in the video game industry and hopefully, inspire other women to join us one day. So I'm Cheyenne. I am a publishing producer at Outright Games.
And my name is Alissa. I am a game designer at Heavy Iron Studios. Just really quick out of the way, two things. One is we're not actually representing our companies here. This is our personal experiences across all the companies that we've worked at. And two, I realize that I don't necessarily look what you might think when you think of a person of color. I want to assure you I am half Japanese. I am mixed race. And that's really all I have to say about it.
And then we have our dear friend Jared here.
I'm Jared. I'm an assistant producer at Outright Games. You're great to have me come out and help moderate.
Yes, our moderator.
Yes.
So we all met at Little Orbit, and I'm like, oh, and Ella's there too. She's the one who got me my job at Little Orbit as a QA tester, so that's how I started off, and we all kind of started off and we met each other. We worked there on games like Adventure Time, Only Skies, Monster High,
Barbie Dream House Party.
Yeah, so a bunch of IP games as QA testers for pretty much all of the major consoles and some mobile games back then as well.
Yeah. And then, unfortunately, due to the circumstances of the industry, Little Orbit kind of closed its doors and let all of the testers go, as we were no longer really needed because they didn't have any games to test. And that's kind of I don't want to say the norm in the game industry, but it's not super uncommon to be hired for a single project. And if that project doesn't get renewed or if the company doesn't have new projects, then you have to go looking for another company to work for. And that was our experience there.
Okay, so the game industry can be unstable. Can you tell us more about your experience with that?
Yeah, so, Alissa?
Yeah, so as I just mentioned, it is a project-based system, and when we're all let go, I happened to be able to network a little bit. So my producer at the company that I eventually worked for actually knew a producer from the company Little Orbit, the company that we were let go from, and he called and was like, hey, is there anyone that you would recommend for this job? And I was put on a short list of people, and I was the first person to respond to the email, which basically got me the job because I was the first person to interview, and they needed it really quick. They needed it that week. So because of that, I was able to get that new job, and at that new position, I was able to be like, hey, I want to do not just QA testing, I want to do design stuff. And eventually, I was able to progress into that, and that's where I am now.
And similarly, friends, because Ella got me the job as a QA tester, one of my fellow coworkers from Little Orbit remembered me as a QA tester, even though he wasn't one. And he's like, hey, we have a position that's opened up over here at Outright Games. Are you interested in? And when he first asked if I was interested, I was doing graphic design at a company, and I was like, I actually like doing this. That company got sold to a bigger company that already had graphic designers, so I ended up doing print production, which is actually those skills kind of transferred pretty easily over to video game production, which ended up being a lot bigger, but you learn fast on the job. And I ended up working as an assistant producer, quickly worked my way up to associate producer, and as of January of this year, I've been a producer, so it's been a huge learning experience, and I'm still learning a lot, but it's been great and super unexpected.
Yeah, so just kind of reiterating, it is a small industry, so if you do join it, make sure not to burn bridges. If you leave a company, do it gracefully, because you don't know when you're going to be working with those people again. Also, just make sure that when you're working at a company, do your best all the time. I know this is things that people always say, but really do, put your heart into it. People see it.
Definitely notice it.
Yeah.
So what are some experiences you've had where friendships have impacted your professional career?
So, The friendship aspect is super important because honestly, pretty much every job that I've had has been people going, hey, I remember you from this company, you want to come work over here, we have this position open, or I'm friends with you, or whatever. You know, as she said, it's a really small industry. There's been, like, I've been in the industry a total of 5 years, and you know, you kind of run into people and you're like, wow, I didn't realize how many people I actually knew. And it kind of expands from there. And so, on top of that, it can also be a very fast-paced environment at times. So crunch time is something you hear often.
It's a real thing.
Although, you know, producers try to schedule things properly so that way there isn't much crunch time, and you know, that's slowly but surely hopefully gonna be a thing in the past. And the friendships that you make really are important because let's say I have a project that needs to be submitted to ratings or to first party, which is like Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, and I am super overwhelmed. But now I have Jared who can help me, or you know, whoever else is in the office, just kind of give them a heads up. Hey guys, I'm working on this, I might need help on that. If you have some free time, I really appreciate any help that you can give me.
Yeah, absolutely. Friendships, and then just talking to your coworkers too. Like, there are a lot of things that I still don't know. I've been in the industry for about 8 years, and there's still a bunch of stuff that I'm like, I don't know how to do this. And then you just reach out to someone who might know how to do it, and they'll either be like, I also don't know how to do that, or they'll actually have an answer for you. The I also don't know how to do that is a common answer though. Sometimes they can point you to someone who does, sometimes they can point you to a website that has more info. Sometimes you're just gonna have to figure it out on your own, but it never hurts to ask, and it never hurts to have good relations with your coworkers, either professional or friendly.
Yeah, I think one thing that's come up a couple of times with someone I've been talking to who we've worked with as a developer company for us, he mentioned that at the end of our project wrap, we all kind of hung out on a Friday on a Zoom call. Actually, I think it's a Google Hangout call, and we all opened up some drinks, some beers, and mixed ourselves some cocktails at home, and kind of just chatted. And you know, it's a pretty chill environment for the most part. Everyone in the game industry, from my experience, is very much themselves, and that's why, you know, I think that it's really awesome. Though, since we all are all ourselves, sometimes there's some comments that come out that might feel inappropriate or offensive, and I mean, it happens in every industry, every company, and I think it's really important to just kind of go, hey, that's not cool, and explain why.
And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you're just so shocked by it, because like they seem like they probably didn't mean anything by it, but that doesn't really make it okay, because you're still offended by it, you're still hurt, and they don't really realize that that was something that you would take personally or you would take offensively, because let's face it, the industry is a boys' club. It's slowly getting less, but it is a boys' club, so things get said sometimes. And that's not necessarily your fault, and it's not necessarily something that you have the responsibility to fix, but it does become your problem if you don't say anything. And if you see something happening to a friend and they're kind of frozen in the industry, you can always just be like, hey, that's not cool, and speak up for them. Because sometimes it's just really hard. Like, sometimes you're in a situation and you're so shocked by what was just said that you don't have a response.
That sounds like it could be pretty frustrating. Do you think it's like a regular occurrence, or?
No. No, it does happen every once in a while, but overall, we both have our own personal experiences that we just absolutely love about this job and this industry, and making games and seeing them come to life.
Absolutely. Yeah, it does happen, but it's really not the norm. And normally when you tell someone, sometimes they can be a bit abrasive at first, and they don't want to admit that that's something that they shouldn't say, or that's offensive. But in my experience, they come back maybe a week or two or a month later, and they'll apologize once they've thought it over and realized, hey, that wasn't cool, I'm sorry.
But yeah, it really is something where you just have to speak up, and like she said, it's not always going to be easy, but I mean, these people are generally pretty cool to hang out with and be around, and they don't mean to be socially awkward, I guess.
Yeah, in our
It's video game industry.
It's video game industry. People can be a little awkward.
That's why we're over here like,
I swear we're normal.
I guess we wanted to share some of the things that we really loved about this industry too. And, I know this isn't directly related to production work, but it's kind of like the outcome of production work for me. I got to go to a Jumanji movie premiere because that's one of the games that we've worked on. And I thought that was super cool because they shut down all of Hollywood Boulevard and we walked the blue carpet and I got to watch the movie in the theater with all of the celebrities who were in the film and who made the film, and that was such a cool experience. On top of that, one of the developers from Way Forward, who is a professor at USC, asked if I could be a guest lecturer last year in October for his production class, so I got to do that. And then they actually asked me to come back this year, so I was a guest lecturer again this year. So it's really not something I ever imagined doing. I was just trying to make video games because when I was in high school, it's like, you could do that? I'm going to do that one instead of whatever else I was going to do instead. But
My realization came much later.
And then
I didn't know this was a job.
And then, we get to talk to you guys, like, what, I mean, I've never, ever imagined having a panel at Comic-Con or anything, and as we mentioned, this is our first one, where we're hoping to make it, bigger than us one day.
Please say you like us. Ask them to come back.
We just actually created, like, all of the social media channels for it, so there's, like, no logo or anything on it, but, we're working on it. Since I'm a graphic designer, I should know how to do this stuff. We're putting, we would love if we could, like, interview other women of color in the video game industry and have them tell their stories and share their experiences, and then we can put it up on YouTube and, from across all
We want to inspire everyone.
Exactly. All of the different positions, because there's not just production and game design.
There's so much.
So many other, positions.
If you can do anything, then you can do something in the game industry, I promise.
Sign me up.
So for one of my favorite things that I get to do with my job is, since I am a game designer, people stream the games that you make on the internet, and I get to watch them in their first raw reaction to playing a level or a system or something that I got to make and design, and I get to watch them struggle through it and make decisions, and I'm like, oh god, I didn't even think about that, I'm so sorry. Or, oh my gosh, that's so cool, I really love that. So I get to, like, have all of the emotions with them as they play this game that I helped make, or made the level up, or did whatever I did on it. And that to me is a really cool and rewarding experience, knowing that what I did directly affected someone's life, and then they are sharing that with people, and that's directly affecting those people that are watching its life. So that's really, really fun and cool for me, and I get to see that result in real time when a game releases. It's like one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah.
That's all very cool. So what does your day-to-day look like?
So for me, as a producer for a publishing company, our company sends out, our biz dev team to kind of figure out what games we potentially want to make. So we would talk to licensors such as Nickelodeon or DreamWorks or Cartoon Network, and kind of just find what licenses that they're currently working on and are willing and able to sell. Then we find a third-party company that's a developing company, because we don't develop our games. Like, she works at a development company, and they pitch ideas for that license, and we decide which game concept would kind of work best. We move forward with working with them and coming up with what the game should be, how we can make it fun. Schedule out the milestone, planning milestone checklist, kind of like we got to get, kids play testing here, we got to get voice recording here. This is where we're submitting for ratings, and this is when we have to submit to first party. And we kind of go through all of those steps. Playtesting is always interesting to see because you never know what the kids are going to do with the games. Our games are usually towards kids, that's why. Lots of age ranges for different games, of course, but our target audience is usually children. But yeah, voice recording is super cool. I got to record Tom Kenny, who's the voice of SpongeBob for one of our games, Troll Hunters, and he played, the gnome in our game. And he just came in and did the gnome real fast, like squeaky little fun voices. And he just hung out and chatted with us. And I think it was super cool for me because my sister has always been a huge SpongeBob fan, and I actually stopped by and I was like, what can I sign for him? And she's like, here's a coffee mug, because she's like also obsessed with coffee. And I was like, can you please sign this for my sister? He's like, yeah, of course, what's her name? And he wrote, Isabel, always stay bubbly, SpongeBob, aka Tom Kenny. So, yeah, I mean, it's just like, that's just one of the fun, cool parts in between everything. And, then we do ESRB submissions for, North America, PEGI for Europe, USK ratings for Germany, et cetera, across the world. And then also do submissions to first party, which is Nintendo for Switch, Microsoft for Xbox, and Sony for PlayStation, and there's Steam for PC. So dealing with those submissions to them as well. And then we release the game, hopefully on time. We work with our internal marketing teams and stuff like that to get everything done.
I don't do any of that. No, schedules are hard. I'm a designer, so what that means is she did mention the game designs, so I will write up documents, sometimes really long documents that detail how the game works, what's going to be in the game, the features that the game's going to have, how you're going to play the game. So for example, if I were to do Mario, it's the loop of the game is you run and you jump and you play it, yeah, but it's run and jump. So I would detail if I was going to explain it, there's enemies and you jump on the enemies, and this is how you have this many lives and whatever else in the game. And so that's all detailed in the document. So I write that up. If that gets approved and greenlit and that document is good to go, then I start actually speccing things out, going more into detail, this is exactly how much health you have, or these are the stats that you're going to have, or this is the amount of damage that you can do. One example is I worked on, one example is if I were to work on a shooter game and you wanted X amount of ammo per level, how do you do the math to figure out how much ammo is required in that level to make sure you can defeat all the enemies, and at what percentage rate would the player need to have accuracy in order to pass the level or fail the level. So if you want a really hard level, a 60% accuracy rate where they have to hit 60% of the bullets that they shoot have to actually impact someone, and 30% of those have to be headshots, otherwise you run out of ammo, and that's a really ammo restrictive level, something like that. That's kind of just random numbers, but something like that would be a next step, and that would be called systems design. Then you take the systems design from there and you can implement that, and that's closer to technical design. And so you can do a rough implementation, sometimes in Unreal, sometimes in Unity, sometimes in a completely different editor, and you go into blueprints, because I don't code, I'm not a programmer, but I can use blueprints, and I go into blueprints and basically code out what the game is going to do and what I want it to do, and I can play a rough version of that, and we can see if it feels good, see if it needs to be tweaked one way or another, because percentages on paper are one thing, but actually playing through it and feeling it is a different sort of feeling, and you can be oh, this is harder than I expected to be able to get this accuracy rate. Maybe I should up the ammo count or lower it or whatever. And then you can work with it from there, and then you normally get programmers to come in around that point where they can make my spaghetti stuff into something a lot prettier, a lot more optimized. Sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes the project is really fast, or sometimes the task is really easy, like opening a door. And usually that's I can make a door open, and I can trigger doors to open and stuff. Oh yeah, so fantastic. So stuff like that is something simple, and I can be tasked with make a door that can open that you can place in the world that is triggered by this thing. And I can be like, okay, cool, and then I can place that throughout the level, wherever it goes. And then even other things that I've done is like narrative design, where you structure out like a story and the writing, and you can use that to create quests and the writing that all goes into the game. There's a few other things. Basically, if it has the design at the end of it, I've done it because I work for really small companies where it's like, hey, we need someone to do this. Does anyone do this? And I'm like, I can try. Okay, go learn that and do that, and then we're gonna use that. And I'm like, okay, sounds good.
Yeah, at smaller companies, you definitely have to wear a lot.
You have to wear a lot of hats. So
you learn a lot too. So that's
yeah,
great.
being willing to learn something as you go is absolutely like necessary if you want to work for a smaller company. Like, you won't have all the tools, you won't have everything that you need to know sitting down. Like, this is why it's really important to feel comfortable asking your coworkers, like, hey, I've never done this before, how do you do this? And sometimes they'll be like, this is how you do it. Sometimes they'll be like, check this website out. They might have an answer. Or sometimes it's like, if it's VR, sometimes it's just never been done before, and they're like, you get to figure that out. Find a new way. And that's like, honestly, that's my favorite. Like, because you get to piece things together. It's like a puzzle where you don't have the image of it, but you get to make the image as you go. So it's really cool. Also, designing puzzles in general is really fun. Like, for the game.
So, well, there's the publishing side and there's the developing side. There's also the licensing side, which we don't have a licensing person here, but that's like...
If you're a licensing person.
Yeah. But that's like, you know, if we were to go to Cartoon Network or DreamWorks and talk to their team, they have someone who's in charge of the project on their end to make sure that the developers have all of the assets they need, any models, concept art, access to music. They'll get us the contact information for voice recording, all the agent information, and then they make sure that the art looks good, looks great, matches the brand, etc., etc. So they're basically, like publishing, we are going to pay them monies for their license, and they just sit there and kind of go, this looks good, this doesn't look good, you need this, let me go check with our team and let me get that back to you. So, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Oh, and then also just know that not all companies are individual. Like Nintendo, they can publish, produce, or publish, develop, and they're the license holders as well for like Mario and stuff like that. So you're not going to often find a Mario game that's developed by question mark company.
So what's your perspective on video games for girls and women?
Yeah. So the very first game that I ever worked on, I was a QA tester for a game called Barbie Dreamhouse Party. And the game, I'm not going to say it was a bad game because I don't think that's really quite true because my nieces played it and they liked it. So, but it wasn't a game that I felt like really met the potential that it could have. Like, it definitely kind of played down all of the game elements and really played up the dressing up your Barbie like a virtual Barbie doll game. And I feel like it kind of talked down to girls. Like, girls aren't known for being gamers. So they're like, okay, the mini games in this are going to be super, super simple, very bare bones, very easy, and not have a lot of replay value, unfortunately, because of that. So I feel like there's a way and a potential, and she's going to talk about it a little bit more, that these games can be added, the depth of them can be added to the games. Like, these girls aren't someone that you have to talk down to in the gaming industry. You don't have to make a game that's easy just for them.
Yeah, I am also going to talk about a Barbie game, Barbie Secret Agent, because I played that when I was a child. Apparently came out in 2001, and I remember she had like a hairdryer, maybe remembering this incorrectly, but this is how cool I thought it was. She had like a hairdryer that was like a grappling, I forget that word every time. A grappling hook, and like she does dodging and rolling, and she like blows her compact for the powder so she can see like the lasers so she can dodge them and stuff. And like she had all of her like pretty girl gadgets had like a secondary super awesome use, and it was a lot of fun for me as a kid, and it felt like I got to be this secret agent traveling the world and stuff. And I recently learned that one of my senior producers, Benny, he worked on that game back in the day, and he's always asking like, what is the game in this? What makes this fun? Just wandering around and exploring isn't gameplay. Where's the gameplay? And he also is always making sure that if it is a girls' license, that it's not just for girls. Like it's actually fun and it challenges kids, and it's not dumbed down or watered down at all just because we are girls. Jumping ahead.
Staying on the topic of making games for you, do you think having people of color in the industry has helped to add more representation in games we play today?
Yes.
Awesome.
Absolutely yes.
Stealing Jared's lines. So basically, we were practicing this panel because I need to practice this kind of stuff, you guys. But
We're still new, but we are professionals, I assure you.
I was trying to figure out like how can I make this more inclusive and stuff. I don't know if I can. We just kind of buy licenses and stuff, and we don't get to make the characters on the publishing side. We use characters that already exist. But then I remembered while talking about this panel and practicing it, oh my gosh, my company just asked us at the end of October to pitch some ideas of games that we should be making. They want to hear what ideas we had in mind, and I went to my Facebook group, it's called Mixed Trees, so it's like mixed chicks basically, and I was like, okay ladies, what are some licenses that you guys know of, movies or shows that are current and popular that have like a little girl of color as the main character? So, they all gave me their favorite and their kids' favorites, nieces' favorites shows, and I found a couple that I really liked, and I was able to type up something about how we could make this a good game and why it's popular now, and I was able to pitch it to my company in just a text box. But I was telling one of the women in the UK on our team about it, who's also a woman of color, and how we were doing this panel and how I figured out, oh my gosh, I can try to make a difference. And she was like, you know what, send me what you send to the company, and I know they see it, but I actually have to verbally pitch these ideas to people, and I'll put it at the top of the list. And I'm like, yes! So while I don't directly get to make these decisions, I can kind of influence them. And, it might not be something that we think of every day at the top of our head because we're just trying to make it through some days. But, it's cool when you realize that you might actually be able to make a difference and make it easier for little girls to see themselves in games. And that was one of the comments, or a couple of the comments that I saw too, where people were listing these shows and they're like, yeah, my niece watched this show and she's like, that girl looks like me. And I'm just like, yes, that's what I want. That's what we want. We want people to see people that look like them in games more often.
And this applies to more than just women of color or women or people of color. It also applies to people with disabilities. Like, it would be great if you could have the option to play a character that is an amputee or has some other sort of disability that isn't really represented in the game industry. And I'm sure little kids would just bawl with happiness if they're like, oh my god, that's me. I see me. I'm in this game. I'm the main character. Because me personally, when I was a little kid, my options to play as a girl in video games was Princess Peach, and I don't know if you can tell I don't quite look like her, just a little bit. But that was the character that I had to play because it was the only girl and I needed to play a girl. It was really important to 7-year-old me, and it's also a little bit important to 30-year-old me. I play as Rosalina now. So, it would be cool if there's a little bit more variety and options.
Yeah, and Alissa pointed out too, not just, women of color, but, oh, I'm sorry, my microphone's over here. But, people who don't, directly identify as male or female and everything, while we're working towards women of color, but, that's eventually it'll lead to, even a bigger range where it's not really that thought of one day because that's the new norm.
Fingers crossed. Let's get there. And super cliche, yeah, but be the change you want to be in the world. If you can do this, then do it. If you can include it, then include it. If you can bring it up in a meeting, bring it up in a meeting. it might not be in that game, but if you keep bringing it up in meetings over and over and over and over again, they're eventually going to be like, okay, maybe we'll just include it this time to make you stop. I mean, that sounds really bad, but yeah, sometimes it would be just to make you stop. Or like, you know, someone higher up might just be like, that's a really good idea, we really should do this, I really believe in this too.
Thanks for sharing. All right, so if you all have any questions, now's the time.
Yes.
I just joined the Boone industry as production coordinator, so I would love to know any advice or any struggles that you guys had in the beginning of joining the Boone industry for women.
So, I think the number one piece of advice that I always have is ask questions when you have questions. Because a lot of times you might want to seem like, I got this, I'm independent, I don't need anyone's help, I know what I'm doing. But one of my coworkers is back there too, and I ask him questions often. So he's always, you know, we're always more than happy to help, and you know, we're a team, and we want to make sure that things get done well and in a timely manner, and it'll save time and make sure that things don't have to get redone. So that was always one of our
And then another thing is there are some people that will say something and it'll hurt because they don't really think about it, and they'll just kind of like for me it happened once, and I was like, wow, that really sucked. And I didn't say anything, but they came out of nowhere like 2 months later and was like, I'm really sorry for that comment. And I didn't say anything to them, so word got back around to them at some point that it made me upset. But kind of knowing that that's gonna happen and sort of pre-bracing yourself for it, so you can maybe come up with a response in your head like, hey, that's not cool. I have just as much right to be here as you do. I have this job. Like, you can't undermine my authority right here, and like stand up for that. Like, it can be hard and scary sometimes, I will admit, but like, it's a good thing for them to realize, like, hey, I'm an equal to you. You're not above me because you're a dude. Like, we're the same level. Because that does happen sometimes, unfortunately.
And that leads into like being confident. So that's something that's not always first nature, because I'm an introvert. Go figure. And I've been told to be confident in myself from other people, and I kind of, always kind of like, oh, I realized that I'm not, but I didn't realize how much it was showing to like other people. And for them to say to be confident in myself, it's kind of like they're telling you, you know what you're doing and you've got this. So just believe that, because we already know it. So, yeah.
And asking questions doesn't make you less confident.
Yes.
100%. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. So you guys seem to have a really positive relationship with your industry, and that's really wonderful. But with like the events that happened this summer with Blizzard and big companies that are probably very unrelated to the smaller companies you guys represent, that stuff has a tendency to drive women away from the industry in droves. And I was wondering if you guys had anything that, like if it affected your relationship with the industry, or if you had any advice to girls that it did.
So a few things, like we don't know fully of what happens, and we don't want to talk about other people's perspective and other people's experience, so we can't relate, or we can't specifically address how they feel or anything like that. But it didn't personally affect me or you that I know of. But for people that it did affect, I'm really sorry that it affected them. Like, I really don't have great advice since I've never been there, and I don't really know how to tell someone how to feel. I can't tell someone how to feel about it. My hope is that they can go find a company that will treat them with respect. Because they are out there, they do exist, I promise. My company treats me with a lot of respect, and I love my company. Like, I love all of the places that I've worked for. I've always felt like a member of the team. I've never felt like a second-class citizen in my office. So that's what I would really just say, like, hey, you are worth it, you're worthy. Go find a company that will treat you with the respect that you deserve.
Yeah. I grew up playing video games, whether they were IP games or whatever. They've always been something that I absolutely love, and to be a part of it is really awesome. And it is very disappointing, and it's sad to hear that that kind of stuff happens. But there are, like we've said, good companies out there to work with and work for, and I would suggest then, if they really want to stay in the industry, to when interviewing at companies and there's a woman involved, like you're interviewing with a woman, just kind of not directly ask, have you ever been harassed?
Yes, that's your question for them at the end when they say, do you have any questions about it? No, don't do that, don't do that.
But maybe something like, what do you enjoy about working here, and kind of see how much, they really like it or dislike it, whether they're hesitant or whatever. But, I think you could tell a lot about a company by how the people who work there interact with each other and how they talk about what kind of work they do and how the environment is. Because you can even ask, like, what's the culture like at the company, stuff like that, so you can get a better idea of whether it may be a good fit for you, because you're not just being interviewed, but you're interviewing the companies.
Absolutely.
Yes?
Can you tell us a story of the day where you just felt like, this is it, I don't think this is for me, and then give us another story of the day where this is why I do it, this is why I kept on doing it?
Crunch time. I cried under my desk. Like, no, I'm not joking. I cried under my desk. It was really hard. I don't have like all of the details that I can share with you, unfortunately, but the project was really hard. Unfortunately, it wasn't managed the way that I was hoping that it was. I did not ask for help, and because I did not ask for help, no one knew that I was struggling so hard. And because I was struggling so hard, and I was like, I have to do this on my own. This is like one of the first projects that I've been given. I have to make it perfect. I'm one person. I can't do an entire team's work, and I didn't speak up and be like, hey, I need support. I need help. I need another person to do this with me. And because of that, I was working really long hours that I didn't necessarily need to have worked. I put that on myself. And I found myself crying under the desk one day, and I'm like, why am I doing this? Why is this here? And then weirdly, very shortly, or around that time actually, the very first game that I did any design work on had a review in IGN. The game was called Super Lucky's Tale, and the magazine, or the website praised the puzzle games. In the puzzle, they're called like foxhole experiences. They're like puzzle games, like sliding block puzzles. And they praised that. They said this was like one of the most fun things in the game. And I was so delighted because that was what I worked on. That was all that I did like in that game. That was my stuff. And I got like praise from IGN, and I'm like, that's me! Ah! So that was really, really cool for me. So yeah.
I wish I had more solid answers on that for myself, but I think it's just, well, of course, there's always the downsides of making games, or kind of working in any industry where it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know, am I going to get this done in time? Is this even possible? This really seems impossible, and that's kind of when you're like, oh my gosh, how did I get myself here? Can I do this again? Is it something that I want to be doing for like the rest of my life? And it feels impossible, but I think, one of the great things in production, at least, is it's constantly changing and constantly growing, and I guess I've realized that I don't want a job where you're just sitting down and doing the same exact thing every day. And like I said, for the production side, there's coming up with a design with the dev team, and it goes into actual production. You review the milestones, you start doing all of the recording, you do play testing, you do submissions for all these different things, and while sometimes it feels impossible, like that satisfaction of realizing, like, I just did all of these different things, and I did them successfully, and I did them on time, and look, my game is released, and people are buying it and playing it, and similar to what she said, is, kind of that, I did it, I have created this thing, this is kind of my baby, even though it's all of these people's babies too, we worked together as a team, and we successfully created this thing that's physical in the world, and I can hold it, and you just kind of put it on your shelf.
For realsies, it's not a joke.
Good job.
Yeah, and what I worked on too, that the Foxholes, that was a team effort. I was just part of that team, and it made me really excited to be part of that team that was working on that. So It was really cool. Like I did sound, I was like thinking about what I said. I'm like, oh, it sounds like I did it all on my own. I didn't do it all on my own. There was other people, lots of other people that helped with that, so.
I guess kind of listening to what both of us said put together, it's kind of like while you're in the middle of it, it sometimes can feel impossible, but you know, once you've accomplished it and it's done and it's out and other people have their hands on it, and it's kind of like,
see
wow.
it and they validate you. They really do.
We kind of have those NDAs, so it's not like we can go around talking about what we're doing during, you know, the year on a regular basis. We have to wait for it to be released.
Old stories, old stories. Yeah. Also, seeing the game that you worked on at GameStop is pretty surreal.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
They raised their hand many times.
Okay. Yes.
So my question is regarding use of psychology for your work. Do you consider identity development theories or child development theories, or do you have psychologists that are on staff or as consultants that you work with to do your work?
My company's really small and we actually don't have that. That would be really cool if we could get that though.
As for me, we actually have a game that is an unannounced game that is for a younger, you know, age range, which a lot of our games are for younger age ranges. But it's like when you think about kids playing video games that are like 5 years old, a lot of them this is their first time playing games. So we have consulted someone. I don't know that their title was, or their experience was in psychology specifically, but they basically told us in easy to understand words that children that are 5 years old are basically aliens. So you've got to explain everything to them. They've never played games before. And they kind of told us these are the things you have difficulty with. These are the kind of things you should explain, and that stuff goes into play testing as well. So we have consulted someone who has kind of specialty on younger age ranges and their thought processes and what they can understand and stuff.
Specifically about identity development, and like ethnic identity development or gender identity development, or
not at this moment, but I think if you get into potentially people who come up with their own licenses, their own IPs, because for me, we work with licenses that already exist and have been established, so we kind of go off of what has already been created. But that sounds like it'd be really helpful in coming up with newer items.
Yeah. Over there.
I have a question, like if you could go back and to your younger self and give yourself some advice, especially since you were underserved or underrepresented in the gaming industry. So two parts. What would that be? And also what characteristics do you feel like have really been a key importance piece to you to be successful in your industry?
So if I went back to my younger self, if I could tell my younger self what I'm doing today or what I'm actually capable of, because like all growing up, all of my teachers would go, by the time you're done with my class, you'll be able to talk to people, like you're gonna be able to talk in front of people and stuff. Like I was shy, so I didn't like talking in front of people, and just giving myself that confidence of, look, you don't even have to worry about it, because these are the kinds of things that you'll accomplish later. It's okay, you've got this. The confidence thing is so important, and that's why I always try, even as a producer, to talk to my teams that I work with and encourage them all the time. I feel like I'm not a kindergarten teacher, but I want to give that encouragement to people to validate their work and let them know that I see what they're doing and it's important and I appreciate their time and everything. I think people just knowing that, whether it's from me or from themselves or anyone, it really makes people, or at least it makes me feel like people see what I've done and it's important. Sorry, I forgot the second.
Is there a characteristic too that you feel like played a key part in helping you achieve that success too?
I believe being personable is really helpful. I know it's not always easy to walk into the work day like, hi everyone, good morning. you've got this, but sometimes if you can, you know, put on those boots and do it anyway, because everyone else isn't going to feel that way either, you know, and they'll remember you for that. So, you know, just being remembered is super helpful, and cheering other people up is helpful. It cheers yourself up, which is important to me, you know. Yeah, so that positivity, if you can keep it, is really helpful.
Oh man, okay, so real quick, we're twinsies, that's what we call each other. We think very similarly, so my answer is going to be very similar to hers. If I were to go back and give myself a little piece of advice, it probably would just be like, you're human, it's okay, you can mess up sometimes. Like, give yourself a break, don't beat yourself up. You don't have to be perfect, there are no F's in work. Like, you turn in something and it's wrong, they'll be like, hey, do this better. They won't be like, okay, that's bad, well, I guess we can't use it, let's move on to the next thing. That's not how it works, that's not how the job industry, that's not how the world works. So, it's okay to mess up. You're just gonna get feedback and then work on it and get better at it. And that's fine, that's okay. That's not like a bad thing. And the characteristic also would just be come at things with a very positive personality, come at things with a very positive angle, I'm trying to say this differently than you. Yeah, like come at things with like a can-do attitude. Be realistic, but also be very optimistic in your abilities. Like make sure that you have the support that you need when you need it, and make sure that you're showing what you can do when you already know how to do it.
So I was kind of wondering, like, when you're trying to get into industry or other things, like, and you have sort of an invisible identity or an identity that can be hidden, like, say, neurodiversity or LGBTQ-ness, do you think that, like, are there times when, like, you would give advice to sort of not disclose or always, or is it like best to always be true to self?
I agree. It's absolutely always best to be your true self. Like I mentioned earlier that the video game industry is, you know, very accepting. Not everyone, but mostly everyone is themselves. We play video games, we play Dungeons and Dragons.
We're a bunch of nerds.
We're a bunch of nerds, yeah. There's a lot of us who are like, you know, artists and just sit around drawing at home.
And you're not alone.
Growing up. Yeah.
Whatever you identify as, you're not alone. So there are other people in the industry that are the same identification as you, whatever it may be. You can find them. If they're not at your company, you can find them online. And people really shouldn't discriminate against you with it, and try to be vocal, try to make a friend. If you can't speak up for yourself, maybe your friend can speak up for you. But I absolutely agree, you should be your true self. You shouldn't have to feel like you have to put on a face to come into work. That sounds very exhausting.
Fortunately, we're able to come in with piercings and hair dye, and we can dress like we're from the 50s.
Yeah, I do that every day.
Come in really casual clothes. Yeah, it's pretty accepting of a huge range of people, so we will be.
I'm going to try to squeeze in one last question up here.
So, there's a lot of themes that have been discussed here, but the two of you have a very similar background to myself, and we're all children of the QA world.
Yes.
Okay. So, back in my day, which goes back almost 30 years, quality assurance and quality software, a lot different back then today. Back then, and this might help some of the folks here, back then there were no instructions, no guidelines. You couldn't go to a college and say, I want to be a software tester. There was no such thing to help you prepare for that. Back then, you fell into that role. So my question for you guys today, if you're a younger crowd, is, and it followed up by a post I saw from San Diego State, that SDSU, especially universities that offer programs for the gaming industry, because the gaming industry is a multi-billion-dollar. I really, really hope that as you guys mature and find other work that you can create better gaming studios to avoid the blizzards, to avoid because they are off-limits for many reasons. So I hope you guys can see the great success.
Thank you.
Well, Lisa actually has more.
Yeah,
interview experience.
Yeah, I guess I do interview some people that come to the office, yeah. Some people do go to school for video games, some people don't. I did not go to school for video games. I went to school for cognitive science, which has nothing to do with video games. I didn't realize until after I graduated and couldn't find a job in a neuroscience lab that my mom was like, hey, you play a lot of video games, try to do a job with that. And I'm like, what? That's a job? Okay. And I got really lucky and I went through the QA world. And a lot of times people do enter the industry through the QA world. And if you're interviewing for QA, you're really looking for someone who can be detail-oriented, someone who can write up steps really well, someone who can be concise and very clear at the same time, someone who understands that they're not there to play a game, but they're there to break a game. And there's a big difference between playing a game all day and breaking a game all day. Playing a game all day is really fun. Breaking a game all day is tedious. It's tedious. It's a lot of work. There's a reason that you're paid for that job. It's a job. So making sure that they understand that coming in is really important. Making sure that they have, if it's for a more technical, like a design job, making sure that they have the skills that fit what the company currently needs. So if the company currently needs a more technical designer, asking them more technical questions and seeing if their answers match up with what would make sense for our company and what makes sense with how our workflow works, and seeing how much extra work it'll be to catch them up to speed with how our workflow is, versus finding someone who is already kind of trained, since we do work at a small company, so we need you to wear multiple hats. So we need you to be comfortable learning on the job and comfortable learning quickly on the job, and not someone who's very rigid and I only work with this one program and I only know how to do this one thing and I don't want to learn anything else. It's really hard for a smaller company to work with someone like that, since
Eagerness to learn is definitely important.
be a lifelong learner, dude. It's cool.
Yep.
If you join this industry, it moves fast. Things change real quick, so you need to be okay with that.
A lot of us are working on, Microsoft, Xbox One and PlayStation 4, but now we're moving into Xbox Series X and S, and there's PlayStation 5, so these things it's constantly learning, constantly growing, and we're always, looking for someone who are willing to grow with the industry, because it's constantly changing. But, I believe that's our time.
I think that's our time now. We got a thumbs up, so